Hello everyone, welcome back to Code with Srini. In this lecture, let's do some validation, and this is the part 3 of our reactive form session. Angular has a set of built-in validators. However, you can create your own custom validator and extend your own functionality over a form control, like country-based, phone numbers, date format, etc. etc. List of built-in validators can be found in here. Like you can see the list of built-in validators, which has a min, max, required, so on, like email, min length. So these are all basically extension of HTML5 rule set, so we can make use of them as of now. But there are two types of validator functions that we can harness the power of Angular, really harness the power of Angular, which are sync validator and async validators. Okay, as the name suggests, sync validators can take control and immediately returns the validity. It should be an object or object of errors or null. Async validators take in the control and returns a promise or an observable that emits a set of validation. Both works in a similar fashion, except the sync returns the validation immediately, but the async does some operation. For example, if you may have to validate from the backend, it can validate from the backend and sends you the information. Async validators are really helpful when you are performing a file upload. So really you can test the MIME of your file upload files, or you can check the extension of your file that you're uploading before sending them to the server. So we are going to look at the sync validator for now. So let's look at sync validator. I'm going to add a validation to our form control. So far we haven't done that yet. So let's go to let me close the app modules and let's start with the add, edit, build components. Yes, if we focus our attention to the add, edit, build components in the component class file, we need to add two validators for our shop name and the particular. Okay, so in the particular, all we have to do is just add validators dot required. So this will check for the required. So if the field is empty, it will throw up an error. And same with the shop name, validators dot required. We need to introduce a submit event. We haven't done that as of now to our form element. So we need to add a event handler called ng-submit. In that, introduce a function or method called onSave. I hope we already have a save method here somewhere. I'm gonna get rid of this and change the button to submit. Let's test this in our application and see how it behaves. Yes, it works, and immediately you will see a mat error messages here. I mean, not the messages, at least an indicator saying that there are errors in your form with a red highlighted indication. Okay, and even you can go to the form group controls and check the shop name or particular here. You will see the errors as required as true. This is the error object that I was talking about in the sync and async validators. So this says that if there is an error, if there are anything, it will be null. All right. Now we need a proper verbose of error, the proper error message basically here to say that there is an error happened and what type of error that we are dealing with. Material has a component called mat error. So using that, we can manipulate, we can modify, or we can check based on the error that we have and then display them here. So that could be mat error. So it should be inside the mat form field, call it as mat error, and this is a particular, right? So particular is mandatory. Let's keep it like this for now. You can have any type of error message that you wish, you can put in there. So it will just display the type of error message, basically shop name mandatory. Okay, so once it's done, now if you go and click, you get two error messages that we have just added. Okay, there is one issue with validation. If you try to fill in the shop name with spaces like this, it is considered as a valid entry, which we should not have. So we must create a custom validator to show this type of entry. So this is not a valid entry. So we can come up with a custom validation like the one you've seen here, right? The validators are required. We're going to create our own validation function and make use of that. So to do that, I will be inside the shared folder. Yeah, in the shared folder, we can create a new file called custom validators there is no strict rules for the file name convention, but the usual one is you should have export and class name. It should match with the class name basically. So I'm going to create a custom validators. So the file name and the name of the class kind of should match. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. It's just a naming convention, so it doesn't matter really. And for custom validation, we need something called abstract control from the Angular class. So abstract control is basically the one that you see here, right? That's the abstract control. Any form control is basically considered as an abstract control. So you don't need to get confused with the terms that used in the Angular forms. And since this will be our main class file, so instead of validators, we will be using something called custom validators. So this will be our class file. And so it's something like this: custom validators dot and the name of the validator. So the name will be like check for white space. Let's call it as check for white space. So this will be the method inside the class that we will be checking for the form control, for the abstract control. So let's proceed with building the custom validation and complete the logic. We will be creating a static method for that. So check for white space, and it takes in the control as abstract controls basically. So it's added from the Angular forms and it returns a validation error. Now this validation errors, right? It's an error object that I've already mentioned. If you look at, in the form group, go to the controls and the shop name, you see this will be returning as either a null or it will be returning a set of validation object. So that validation object is the validation errors that we are going to emit. If the abstract control as an error, so the validation will be sending either null or a validation error. So we need to explicitly specify the type of the return object, and that's our first step so far. So to make the squiggly lines disappear, we just give it as a null for now. So our custom validation is complete, but with one logic that I have in place. I'm not going to run through the entire logic. This is just about the this is just about the custom validator. So the logic I already have in me, I just copy pasted from my lecture, so the code will be available for you. So basically what this says is the control that we are going to check will be checking for value if it is any and checking for the length of the value, and I'm going to check if there is a white space in my control, in my value, and I'm going to check if it is valid. I'm going to emit only white space as true if there is an error, right? So it's fairly simple. Now our custom validator is complete. We need to bind them to our reactive form. So in the reactive form, we need for the particulars and the shop name. So instead of just adding as a comma separated, we should wrap them in an array. So it will take up as an array, and then it'll be a custom validator dot check for white space. It's already there, it's showing up for us. And similarly, we should add to our shop name as well. There you go. So now if we go check it says shop name is mandatory, but still it's an error. Now what if you want to have multiple validation, like to check for at least minimum characters, right? So we need to check, say for example, if somebody just types in 2 characters, we need to have a set of minimum characters, like at least 3 characters needs to be there to validate a shop name. So in that case, we can have, for the shop name, we can just put in our HTML validators, like validators.minLength to be set as a 3 and custom validators together. Let's add them to our particular as well, because both are going to share the same set of validations logic. If we go check this out, now if you type in just 2 words, it will still show it as an error. But if you're going to fill that up for more than 3 characters, it's going to pass. Now we added 3 criterias, like the required, in length, and check for white space. But we are seeing only one validation message, right? So it's just a same redundant message saying that the shop name is mandatory for all the 3 types of validation. Now we need to fix that. We need to have a different set of validation messages. To do that, again, we're going to harness the power of Angular ngIf to display them, to switch them between the error messages. So let's proceed with the shop name mandatory thing here. I'm going to wrap them into a div, and I'm going to have a ngIf statement. And finally, I'm going to call the expense form and I'm going to get the form control name, which is the form control name is basically the shop name that we are going to get, and we need a check, an assertiveness check basically. So errors dot required. Okay, so this will flag up, this will fire up only when the required is shown in the errors, right? So this bit is done, and similarly we should have for the min length as well. So for the min length, all the characters are lowercase. The shop name must be at least let's add something here. Required length characters. Alrighty. So you're sending a good message, like a proper message, like shop name must be at least the length of the required length of the shop name characters, right? So let's test this. Firstly, the shop name is mandatory. Secondly, shop name must be at least 3 characters, because we set 3 characters of validation in our reactive form. If you notice, if we set it as a 4 character, or not in the shop name, you can see the difference. So it says 4 characters. Now it is dynamic. We don't need to worry about how many characters that really needs to be validated. Okay. And finally, we need to check for the white space validation as well. That is only all lowercase, not to get confused, because I'm just following the standard that is in HTML5. I'm setting all the characters as lowercase, which is as only white space. Spelling mistake, only white space, because I'm going to emit this property, right? So let me copy paste them here, and the message, something funny, looks like you entered only. All right, now we go back to our page and then check like this. You get looks like you have entered only spaces. Now we get multiple errors. We can fix them up later using multiple conditions, like to show only the relevant messages. Like now in this case, it should show up only looks like you entered white spaces, and shop name must be at least 3 characters, right? And we should also have quantity and rates per unit field as required. Quantity, unit, and I think all the three things should be required. So now in our case, the quantity should be validated based on the decimal places as well, and even the rate per unit. The quantity could be like, let's say 10.500 grams, so it should be like this, and the rate must be 10 dot like 22. It's a monetary value, so it should be like 2 decimal places, and the quantity can have 3 decimal places. So we can make use of same validators for both the fields. That's what I'm trying to say. But firstly, let's go step by step. In the quantity, I'm going to add a validator. Firstly, our validators will be required, and validators dot, let's do a pattern validation for this now. So the pattern validation basically allows me to check for the numbers. Is basically a regex. So I'm going to check for number, and after the decimal place again numbers. This should be same with the rate per unit as well. So we have the messages for quantity. I just made it similar to what we have done in the shop name, like the ng if, and same for the pattern as well. But this is all good, but we want to restrict user to enter only the pattern that I intend to use. So this is a number field. Basically, we don't need to allow them to type any alphanumeric text. So in that case, I'm going to just introduce number to our type property. So let's go ahead and check it to see. We cannot enter anything. We can only enter number, or let's check quantity is required. So this is good for now. This will restrict only the user with only numbers and decimals. But hang on a second, this is Angular, and we should do the Angular way. By tapping on Angular's core concept like pipes and directives, we can create a directive to have a custom input entries. So let's go ahead and create a directive. Created a decimal number directive inside the shared directives path. And then to make a class as a directive, we need to decorate our class as a decorator, at directive and selector property. So that comes as at directive, and it's imported from the Angular core, and a selector, simple as that. We will call them as decimal number. So for now that's fine, and obviously we need to export a class, right? So our decimal number directive is almost complete, but we need few informations. I mean, a lot less information that you imagine. I have already written a logic, so I'm not going to bore you with the logic here. I just copy paste and I will include that in the code base. A short explanation is like we are going to add this decimal number directive in our HTML element somewhere, like for example here. All right, and we will be checking for all the key inputs, key entries, like whenever you type in the keyboard for the quantity field, it will check for that and it will validate that for us, and it will allow only the numbers here and then numbers and the decimal places. So in here I will be having a decimal places set for a 2 or a 3. Okay, so if it is a rate per unit, it will be 2 decimal places, and if it is for a quantity, it will be 3 decimal places. So based on that, we will be making an entry to the field. So basically that's that. I'm gonna add all the missing elements, all missing inputs into our directive. So this is all done. So this is the logic right here. You can make use of that logic, and the next step will be we changed it into a number, right? So we change it back to text. So we will be allowing all the entries that we want, like alphabets and the numbers. And finally, we have to call the directive using this as decimal number. So this will kickstart the directive for the validation and decimal places. So this decimal places that I've talked about is these ones. So this will be, these ones. Yeah. So this will be the attribute in the input field that we are going to use. So we have to set a value for that. So it's decimal places equals, since this is a quantity, we're going to add 3 decimal places. To activate our directive, we must go to the app module and we must include them in our declarations like this. So a decimal number is showing up in the suggestion. Now once you've done that, it will be included in your module and the set of instructions starts kicking up, like add bill. Let's go and check. I'm going to type in AS. Now no, nothing is working. So I'm going to check if the number entry is working. It is working, and I'm going to check the decimal places. We set 3 decimal places. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now only 3 decimal places are getting entered. Now just to check, if I set it as 4, let's see if it is allowing us to add 4 decimal places. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. As you see, it works perfectly well. So I'm going to change it back to 3, and that's it for creating a directive. Even though this is not coming under the scope of a reactive form, I feel this is very much needed, because when you're going to build an application, all the components, all the elements of the Angular has to come into play, because in a project you cannot just rely on one particular aspect of your application. You need to think variety of ways to do such things, because the way I work in an environment is we need to make use of pipes, we need to make use of directives, and in an Angular form, and it gets much more complicated when you're handling forms inside forms, which is a dynamic form. Okay, and we are at the end of this lecture. However, there are a lot more things that are needed to get our expense sheet working end to end, such as submitting a form, adding more items per bill, adding validation for the same. Thanks a lot for watching Code with Srini. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up and share. See you soon on the next lecture. Stay tuned. Bye bye.